Hey, joyful wife. Thanks for joining me again. Today, I want to talk about how to communicate so your husband can actually hear what you're saying. I spent so many years feeling like I was speaking a different language than the man that I married. If you've poured your heart out only to see his eyes glaze over, or if you found yourself repeating the same things over and over again, then stay tuned. The first thing that helped me is understanding that before I say a word, I need to make sure that I'm mastering my own emotions. When we're feeling overwhelmed, hurt, or frustrated, we often try to rush into conversations hoping to find some sort of relief through being heard. The problem is we're actually communicating from the part of our brain that is more emotional than rational. And I truly believe that our husbands can feel this. When our husbands feel this, that causes them to go into defensive mode. And you've probably felt that before with someone. I used to approach conversations with my husband after I was already escalated emotionally. Maybe it was a long day of work, there's stuff with kids, or not feeling my best. I'd finally get a moment with him and just launch into all my frustrations and all the needs that I'm lacking around the house. And guess what his response was? He would either shut down completely or he would just get defensive. I ended up feeling even more unheard and isolated than before. One of the breakthroughs came when I realized I needed to regulate my own emotions first. So that's why I developed the what I now call 60-second emotional reset. It's a simple practice that helps me to go from emotional reactivity to calm clarity before initiating any important conversation. The quick reset isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about processing them enough that I can communicate clearly rather than emotional dumping. When I took care of my own emotions before jumping into conversations, the difference was immediate. Instead of his usual defensive posture, he actually leaned in and engaged. The same topics that previously led to arguments were suddenly really productive conversations. The key was my emotional state setting the tone for the entire interaction. You can start implementing this approach today. So, like before your next conversation with your husband, take 60 seconds to check in with yourself and make sure that you are feeling calm clarity before addressing any situation. You can start implementing this approach today. Before your next conversation with your husband, take about 60 seconds to just check in with yourself. Are you communicating to genuinely connect with him, or are you seeking emotional relief? Just this awareness alone can transform your communication dynamic. You can start implementing this approach today. Before your next conversation with your husband, take 60 seconds to really check in with yourself. Are you communicating to genuinely connect with him, or are you seeking some sort of emotional relief that you think having a conversation might bring with him? This awareness alone can really transform the whole communication dynamic. And to find the reset that I'm talking about, just go straight to the description link, and I've already got it linked in there for you. Another great way to improve how your husband hears you is to understand that people communicate differently. So I process externally. I process through talking things out. I think out loud. I explore possibilities verbally and come to clarity through conversation. Where my husband, he's more of like an internal processor that he just needs time to take in the information. And once he's reached a conclusion or decision, then he's more expressive about it. When we don't understand this fundamental difference, we end up really talking past each other. I also have to be careful with external processing because I remember a time talking with my husband and I was just shooting all this information at him, and I was really just trying to process all the ideas, just exploring thoughts that were going through my mind, different approaches to things we were talking about. And I saw his eyes glaze over. And I honestly don't think this is a men women thing. I do have a really good friend that when I throw too many words out, her eyes also glaze over. So I just try to pay attention that, okay, maybe I'm using too many words. I could sense frustration and shutdown in people that are more internal processing when I've just verbal diarrhea all over them. I have to remember to really process myself like what I'm going to say beforehand and then make it very clear so that way they have little information to take in that they can chew up and swallow and think about on their own. And then they can give me an answer to what it is that they're thinking about. So maybe you're the external, you're the internal. I would love to hear below in the comments. Take a few moments if you're the external processor and decide on 1 to 3 key points that you want to communicate and focus solely on those the next time you want to have a conversation. And if you're an internal processor, it's really easy to help the external processor let them know that they're giving a little bit too much information. One of the biggest shifts that I saw in my marriage is when I learned to communicate with respect. I was never like belittling my husband or anything like that. I would consider myself kind of just blunt and to the point. But when my husband would sense disapproval or criticism or disrespect in my tone or my words, his brain would actually experience it as a threat. And that would just trigger his withdrawal. For many years, I would communicate this way, really unknowingly and not intentionally. And it felt like respect to my husband, but he couldn't pinpoint what was making him shut down. My tone would unconsciously just communicate frustration. I'd use phrases like you never, you always, and I would bring up issues in front of other people, which really made him feel disrespected. So even when my words were reasonable, my delivery often contained subtle signals that made him feel criticized. The transformation in our communication happened when I started intentionally communicating with respect first before raising any concern. I began to acknowledge something I genuinely appreciated about my husband instead of saying, "Why haven't you fixed XYZ yet?" I would say, "I really appreciate how you do things around the house, and I'm so thankful for that. Do you know when you would be able to fix X, Y, and Z?" Instead of thinking, "Well, I've told him 3 times and it still hasn't been done," or just letting it go until something major happens and then being, "See, I told you you should have fixed it." There's just different ways of approaching it in a more respectful way. And it helps you to have a little bit more emotional stability when you don't wait for something to be completely broken and then be furious that you didn't listen to yourself and ask him more frequently to help out with whatever it is. You're approaching it in a very gentle and loving way, and that communicates respect for him, but also lets him know that, hey, this is really important to me. It's also not manipulation. It's an understanding that the lens through which your husband receives information, and when he feels respected, his defensive walls come down and he can actually hear what it is that you're saying. When he feels criticized, his brain is too busy defending against the perceived attacks to process what it is you're saying. So again, before you have any conversation with your husband, take a moment to just think about something you appreciate about him and express that appreciation first, then share your concern. This small shift really signals safety to his brain and keeps the communication channels open. I remember when I first became a stay-at-home mom, then a work-from-home mom, when my husband walked in the door, I was just like this, and this. And I didn't really give him time to unwind because I've been wound up all day. My thoughts were, hey, welcome to the wound up home. This is where we're at. But I started really paying attention and communicating for receptivity rather than convenience. I started really paying attention to when my husband seemed more engaged and responsive, and I discovered some really interesting patterns. My husband was more receptive about 30 minutes after he walked in the door, where I didn't unload for those 30 minutes. I kind of just let him do the things that he needed to do. So he had that little bit of time to decompress. And then I also noticed on the weekend mornings when we're not rushing around to do something, and then also when we're doing activities where we're side by side and not necessarily face to face. I don't know why side by side is different, but I just feel like he's a little bit more calmer because either we're walking together, we're driving together, we're doing something together, which makes us side by side. And that could possibly be it as well. Whereas a lot of times confrontation comes face to face. So maybe it's just something simple as that. And the brain just understands that one is definitely not a threat. So, but when I began timing these important conversations for these windows of receptivity, it was like a communication miracle. The same conversations that would lead to shutdown or conflict were met with engagement and more thoughtful responses. And I know that he wasn't a different person because I gave up on trying to change him. I learned that I needed to change me. But when I changed me, I changed the way I interacted. And when I changed the way I interacted, it changed the way that he responded back to me. So he was just simply in a mental state where he could actually hear me. I encourage you to start observing your husband's natural rhythms of receptivity. When does he seem more relaxed and engaged? When does he seem to initiate conversation more often with you? These are really your windows of opportunity for really meaningful conversation. And once you've established more of that safety environment, the emotional safety environment, you have more and more of these windows that are open to you. So combine these optimal timing moments with the 60-second emotional reset, which again is down below, and just see how your husband responds. Again, transforming how you communicate with your husband isn't about manipulation or changing who you are or changing your needs. It's about bridging your and his natural differences so you can finally feel heard and connected. Start with the 60-second emotional reset, which again, down below. Then implement these principles of emotional regulation, clarity, respect, and timing. If you found this helpful, please feel free to click the subscribe and notification bell so you don't miss next week's video, which is on how to reignite connection when you're feeling like roommates. And again, as always, I would love to hear your comments below about which of these you're going to try or which you have tried in the past and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I was doing that. I read every comment and I am here to support you on your journey to being a more joyful wife and having a more peaceful and loving and connected marriage.